I'll never forget the morning everything changed. Sunlight had just started slipping through my kitchen blinds. I was barely halfway through my first cup of coffee when I heard the slow crunch of boots on gravel echoing up my driveway. There, framed in the golden light, stood a sheriff's deputy with a manila envelope official looking serious as a heart attack. I watched almost in slow motion as he walked right up to my wooden fence post, stapled a notice dead center, and didn't even look my way before heading back to his cruiser. The words at the top were in bold, "Lien Notice," and underneath, black and white, a demand for $3,800 in unpaid HOA fines. All because of the fence the deputy had just defaced. Yeah, that's how my day started. I stood there, still in my slippers, hands shaking as I read the document over and over. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not to me. 6 months back, I'd built a split-rail fence around my 5-acre property. Nothing fancy, just the kind of sturdy, weathered wood you see everywhere in rural Texas because you need something to keep goats and chickens from wandering onto the road. I built it by hand, just like my grandfather did 70 years ago. And let me tell you, nobody had a problem with it until Willowbrook Estates started pushing their way into places they didn't belong. Let me back up a sec, because this mess didn't start with that fence. It started years ago, when developers came sniffing around buying up farmland, building McMansions that rose out of nowhere like some kind of fungus. They called the new neighborhood Willowbrook Estates, planted fancy stone pillars, and set up an HOA that somehow, through a bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo, claimed authority over folks like me whose families had been here long before anybody thought to call this area estates anything. Most of us old-timers ignored them, figured it was just noise, suburban folks playing neighborhood cop. That was our first mistake. So here I am minding my own business, raising a handful of chickens and goats for eggs and milk. Nothing commercial, just what you'd expect on a real working ranch. The split-rail fence wasn't there for looks. It was for keeping my animals safe, for doing things the right way. 2 weeks after I finished it, the first letter landed a $100 fine for an unapproved exterior modification. I thought, you have got to be kidding me. So I called the HOA office and got stuck talking to Brenda, who sounded like she'd just swallowed a lemon, nasal uptight, every syllable clipped. She told me to submit an official appeal, fill out their forms, provide photos, so I did. A month later, I get a denial in the mail. Fence fails to meet community standards for boundary demarcation, whatever that means. And another fine, $200, for continued noncompliance. The pattern was pretty clear: escalating fines, vague rules, and a whole lot of nothing for community. I decided enough was enough. The next board meeting was coming up third Tuesday of the month in the fluorescent-lit community center, so I put on my best jeans and went to speak my piece. Walking in, you'd have thought I was storming the castle. 30 or so folks from the neighborhood sat in folding chairs, all eyes glued to a long table up front where the 5 board members sat like judges. Right in the middle there she was, Karen Whitmore, HOA president, Queen Bee herself. Mid-50s, bleached hair, helmeted into place, jacket screaming, "I demand to speak to your manager," you know the type. They opened the floor for resident concerns, so I stood up and told my story. 20 years here ranching, keeping animals. Fence matches the rest of the county. Karen's lips got tighter and tighter the more I talked. When I finished, she leaned forward with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," she said, slow, like she was explaining things to a toddler. "Willowbrook Estates has standards. We can't have every resident doing whatever they please. Your fence is weathered wood. Our guidelines state fencing must be white vinyl or ornamental iron. No exceptions." I pulled out my copy of the guidelines, read it 3 times. Nowhere did it say that. "Show me where it says that, because I don't see it." Her face turned beet red. "It's implied under general aesthetic standards. The board has discretion to interpret the rules for the good of the community." I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "My ranch was here before your community existed, and now it's part of Willowbrook Estates," she shot back. "If you don't like our rules, perhaps you should consider relocating somewhere more suited to your lifestyle." Dead silence. My neighbor Jake, 2 houses down, shook his head, but nobody else said a word. Fear ruled that room. That's when I knew this wasn't about offense. This was about power. Karen had herself a target, and she wanted to make an example. The fines kept coming, $300, $500, stacking up with late fees and legal costs. I tried calling other board members, but none would cross her. 4 months in, I owed over $2,000, not even counting so-called legal fees. I hadn't even seen a courtroom. It felt like a shakedown. I started losing sleep, poring over state statutes, learning everything I could about HOA law. Most of it was nonsense, but then I found it. State law required HOA bylaws to be ratified by a supermajority with proper notifications and recorded votes. Curious, I filed a formal records request. Brenda dragged her feet, claimed the records were in storage, but state transparency laws forced her hand. 2 weeks later, she dropped a heavy banker's box in my lap, full of meeting minutes and faded correspondence. I spent my weekend elbow deep in paperwork, and you know what I found? Or didn't find, really. There was no record of the current bylaws ever being voted on. The board had just adopted them 15 years ago, figured nobody would notice. My hands shook as I realized what that meant. Every fine, every enforcement could be completely invalid. I needed help, and I found it in Patricia Chen, a property law attorney with a reputation for taking on bullies. She looked at my evidence and just grinned. If these weren't properly ratified, not only are your fines toast, this could unravel years of HOA enforcement. You ready for a fight? We filed suit the next week, not just challenging my fines, but the HOA's entire authority. Word spread fast. Suddenly, folks who'd been too scared to speak up started knocking on my door. The Johnsons fined $800 for painting their door the wrong beige. The Wilkersons threatened with foreclosure over a flower bed. Years of bottled-up frustration boiling over. Karen sent out a newsletter calling me a troublemaker out to destroy property values. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted. At the next board meeting, the place was packed. People wanted answers. Where were the voting records? Who gave the board this much power? Karen tried her usual tricks, tabling discussion, saying it's a legal matter, can't discuss. But Jake Harrison, my quiet neighbor, stood up and wouldn't be shut down. We have a right to know if you've been illegally fining us for 15 years. The room erupted, voices rose, fear cracked. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. Court day came on a clear October morning. The HOA rolled in with a pack of lawyers, all expensive suits and briefcases. Patricia, cool as ever, laid out our case. The law required a vote. There wasn't one, so the bylaws had no teeth. The HOA's team argued technicalities. Statute of limitations implied consent. Judge Margaret Sullivan, 60-something, sharp as a tack, wasn't having any of it. Then came Karen's deposition video. Patricia grilled her for hours. Karen couldn't keep her story straight, blamed missing records on a flood, then a computer crash. Then just got angry, saying sometimes leadership means making hard choices. The judge's face was stone. Her ruling was a hammer blow. The HOA's bylaws were unenforceable. Not only were my fines thrown out, but every enforcement action under those bylaws for the last 2 years had to be refunded over $200,000. Judge suspended all HOA powers until new bylaws could be properly adopted and ordered new board elections within 60 days. When the gavel fell, the courtroom burst into applause. The HOA lawyers looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. Karen just sat there, white as paper, then red, then white again, couldn't decide which. On the steps outside, she grabbed my arm, mascara smudged, voice shaking. "You've ruined everything. Property values will tank. The neighborhood will turn to chaos. Are you happy now?" I looked her right in the eye and said, "Yeah, I'm thrilled. My fence stays." She let go, disappeared down the sidewalk. 2 months later, Jake Harrison was voted in as the new HOA president unanimously. First order of business, new bylaws written by a committee of real residents, me included. We met every week in his living room, hashing out rules that finally made sense for everyone. My fence is still there, weathered, sunlit, standing proud. Some mornings, feeding my chickens, I look at it and think about how even the smallest push can topple a tyrant. Karen. She moved out 3 months later after getting hit with personal liability for the board's legal fees, over $50,000. The for sale sign didn't mention that part. Sometimes I wonder if she ever tells her new neighbors about the time she lost her little kingdom. But here's the thing, just because you win once doesn't mean the fight is over. New folks move in, rules change, and someone's always itching to tell others how to live. That's how it goes in any community, I guess. So let me ask you, where's the line between order and overreach? When does community start to feel like control? I'm curious what you'd do in my boots. Would you stand up or let them push you around? Let me know down in the comments. because these days I figure we could all use a reminder that sometimes the fence is worth fighting for.